Good morning, class. Again, the same old story. We had technical glitch. Are you able to hear me clearly? Please let me know. And can you able to? Are you able to see the slides? Today's topic is bronchiectasis. The system is a little slow, so please bear with it. Are you able to see the slides? And the second question is, are you able to hear me loud and clear? Type in your messages, type in your replies. Okay, we'll start off with the class. Today's topic is bronchiectasis. Bronchiectasis is a disease of large airways. It's by definition wise, it's an abnormal dilatation of the bronchi. It may be mostly second, third generation bronchi. It may be either focal or involving the airways, supplying a limited region of lung parenchyma, or maybe diffuse, including it's a widespread distribution, or maybe a whole lobe is involved. So that is basically what diffuse is all about. And what is important about bronchiectasis, why I have taken up this topic, because it is one of the most, it was a very disabling and a very fatal condition during a pre-antibiotic era, and still the prevalence rate is still very high. It has been reduced, but it's still very high. You can see the prevalence rate is 52 per 1 lakh, and usually the age of presentation is mostly from adolescent to old age, and it is more severe in old age. And pathophysiology and causes. We'll talk about the pathophysiology. How does the bronchiectasis, how does it happen? So what happens, there will be an epithelial injury, there will be subsequent persistent inflammation due to mucus hypersecretion or due to ciliary movement. Those defense mechanism in the lungs, so wherever there will be an epithelial injury or there will be mucus hypersecretion or mucus stasis, these all will be a ground for it is predisposing ground for the organisms to grow. And if there is a reduced mucociliary clearance, there will be a subsequent plugging of the airways, and with the persistent any chronic bronchial infection, even allergic infection. So if there might be a recruitment of, as you know, all these inflammatory cells, macrophages and neutrophils, and they will have subsequent inflammation with their whole army of toxins like interleukins, leukotrienes, even reactive oxygen species. So any inflammation going on, any persistent inflammation going on, and it forms a very vicious cycle. And along with the reduced mucociliary or defense, the primary defense mucociliary, this is called mucociliary defense clearance. With the reduced mucociliary clearance, there will be added insult, and as the ongoing inflammation continues, this will lead to permanent airway damage, structural distortion of the airways, and even dilatation of the bronchi. It is how bronchiectasis. Just a minute. हेलो, क्लास में हो, जल्दी बोलो. क्लास में हूँ, हाँ ले जाना है 12 बजे तक. So that is how the inflammation, persistent inflammation, and with the abnormal defense mechanism, the local defense mechanism of the airways, the cilia and the mucus stasis, and thickened mucus, and lesser clearance of the mucus. These are the grounds for the pathogens to grow up and to render more insult to the airways. So now we'll go back to the causes, and from causes we can trace the pathophysiology. The most importantly is infective causes. Bronchiectasis has been classified, as you have learned in pathology. Histopathologically, it has been classified, as well as it can be classified according to like local or diffuse, as I as we already talked about. So the most common cause, one of the most common, is post-infective. Post-infective is any pneumonia. It can be a sequelae of a pneumonia. Tuberculosis is one a very important and prevalent cause in India. Tuberculosis can cause the mechanism how tuberculosis can cause this bronchiectasis. It can produce any reactivation of tuberculosis can directly infect the airways and distort or and damage the airway structure, or because of lymphadenopathy. What happens? The lymph nodes, it tends to produce a bronchial obstruction, and that can, because of the pressure on the bronchi, any lymph and tubercular lymphadenopathy, it can cause further obstruction of the bronchi and further impairment of the mucus clearance, and that will be another cause for the origin of bronchiectasis. So that will be because of the there are two pathology which is to be remembered in bronchiectasis. One is inflammation, and the other part is pulmonary airway obstruction. So the airway obstruction is a salient feature of bronchiectasis, as it happens in COPD. But the differentiating features from COPD is, in COPD you will have along with airway obstruction, you will have small airway, mostly small airway involvement. But in cases of bronchiectasis, you will have large airway involvement, and subsequently there will be clubbing in cases of bronchiectasis, which doesn't happen in COPD. These are the subtle differences in cases of COPD and bronchiectasis. So I was talking about because of the pressure by the lymph nodes, or erosion of the by the casseting lymph nodes of the bronchial epithelium, that can also tend to produce structure, subsequent fibrosis and structural damage to the bronchi. So that is how the tuberculosis can lead to bronchiectasis. Then pertussis it's a very common historically it's a very common disease in the children, by the name of whooping cough or 100-day disease, and that can also inhabit the lungs, and it's very resistant to antibiotics, so that can also lead to structural damage of the bronchi and bronchiectasis. Then impaired mucociliary clearance, and most importantly you have three conditions, congenital condition I'll talk about: cystic fibrosis, then primary ciliary dyskinesia, and there is something called Carter-Negger syndrome. And the third one is Young syndrome, and there is something called alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. So these three you have to remember. Cystic fibrosis, it's an autosomal recessive disorder. There is a mutation on the F508 on the 7th gene and on the fine locus of F508, and what it does, it makes, because of the defect in the conductor channels, and there will be subsequent impaired sodium absorption, and there will be Usually this is very common in childhood, and the child will usually the mother will complain about the salty taste, which usually coming from a child's sweat. So what happens because of the mucus becomes viscid in cases of cystic fibrosis. It becomes very thick and viscid because of abnormal conduction channel due to impaired absorption of sodium and water, and excretion of chloride. There will be subsequent excretion of chloride, and because of this transmembrane conduction receptor defect, you will have mucus plug being formed inside the bronchi, because and the clearance won't be adequate, and that will form a ground for pathogen for the growth of the pathogens. Then the other way is alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. As we talked about in emphysema, alpha-1 antitrypsin is again because of the deficiency of alpha-1 antitrypsin enzyme, the neutrophil elastase, they are not inhibited, and as the inflammatory process continues, the neutrophil elastase will go on to cause further damage to the bronchial structure, causing lysis and distort the bronchial structure. So that will again can lead to bronchiectasis. So other salient feature of alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency is, as you know, is emphysema. This is a pan-assigned emphysema. And third is Cardigan syndrome. Cardigan syndrome, you will have dysmotility because of defect in the tubules. In the cilia, they are made of dynein and tubules, so there will be defect in the contractility of the cilia, and so there is a triad in Cardigan, and it is as situs inversus, which is inversion of the organs. Heart may be on the right side, or liver may be on the left side, and along with chronic sinusitis. And the third important feature is bronchiectasis. There is also obvious infertility in only in male patients in cases of Cardigan, but it doesn't happen in females. So that's why the infertility does not form a triad of Cardigan syndrome. It's a very important point to remember. So there is a defect in the cilia. Then further causes are immunodeficiency, others like A-gamma globulinemia, or HIV, or common variable immunodeficiency syndromes, or any chronic lymphocytic leukemia. So obviously, because of the immunodeficiency, there will be more predisposition for the organisms to attack the bronchi and cause further damage. Then you have the exaggerated immune response is like inflammatory bowel disease. Allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis is very important to talk about because of the hyper because of the immune response due to pulmonary aspergillosis, and there will be hypersensitive reaction, and that can especially in patients with predisposition to asthma, or in asthmatic patient, this immune hypersensitive mediated reaction to to the aspergillus, and it will again subsequently lead to bronchiectasis. Then you have certain congenital abnormalities of the bronchial walls, Williams-Campbell syndrome, Marfan syndrome. Then inflammatory pneumonitis, mostly due to the aspiration of the gastric contents, even aspiration of alcohol, the patient who are drowsy, or patient who conscience is obtended, a patient with stroke, patient even with connective tissue disorders like esophageal dysmotility disorders like sclerosis, where there is a fibrosis of the part of the esophagus. So these patients have tendency to even microaspirate or macroaspirate, and invariably because of the aspiration, the chances of infection and subsequent bronchiectatic changes are further enhanced. Smoking inhalation, as obviously, is one of the very important predisposing factors. Fibrosis, then there is something called traction fibrosis because of the fibrosis of the structure of the bronchi. It is called a tranquil bronchiectasis, and there will be like causes will be idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis or sarcoidosis, and even autoimmune disorders like rheumatoid arthritis, SLE. These all are or tend to produce traction bronchiectasis. Then there's something called mechanical obstruction, again like foreign body or especially in children, or as I talked about, in extrinsic compression by the lymph node, or even the intrinsic compression, that is endobronchial growth like carcinoid or any endobronchial cancer, or any extra bronchial extrinsic compression due to lymph nodes, due to cancer or due to tuberculosis. These all can cause mechanical obstruction, and that can lead to again subsequent predisposition to bronchiectasis. Then there's something called primary Mycobacterium avium complex infection, which is a non-tubercular mycobacterial induced infection. Then connective tissue disorder we talked about. There are several other causes. So mostly we have talked about, and as we can revise the pathology, it is a epithelial injury and mucus hypersecretion, decreased mucociliary clearance. There will be plugging of the airways, and subsequent chronic bronchial infection, and then inflammation, and recurrent inflammation or recurrent infection, and that subsequently leads to airway damage and abdominal dilatation of the bronchi, and in an airway obstruction. So these 2 points will eventually form a pillar for bronchiectasis. So again, looking back at the pathogenesis, is bronchiectasis, as I talked about, is a consequence of inflammation and destruction of the structural component of the bronchial tree, mainly the mid-sized airways, segmental, subsegmental bronchi, and microorganisms like staph, Pseudomonas, Klebsiella, Haemophilus. These are atypical organisms. They produce certain toxins and proteases, and there will be a recruitment of the neutrophils and further destruction of the wall structure, cartilage, muscles, elastic tissue, and they might be replaced by fibrous connective tissue, and will lead to dilatation of the bronchi with the accumulation of the thick purulent material and occlusion due to fibrous thickening. And there might be increased vascularity that might lead to enlargement of bronchial arteries and increase anastomosis between bronchial artery and pulmonary artery. There might be erosion into pulmonary artery and massive hemoptysis, which is the most common cause for death in cases of bronchiectasis. Clinical features, as the name suggests, because there is pathology in the bronchi, there will be persistent and recurrent cough. It might be purulent and sputum production. It might form plugs, as in cases of aspergillosis, or it might be yellowish pus-containing sputum. Then you will have repeated respiratory tract infection. Hemoptysis is one of the very common association with bronchiectasis. Then systemic symptoms like fatigue, weight loss, and myalgia. This can be a part of the secondary disease. Then you will have sometimes you can have insidious onset of symptoms, and so the chronicity will be there. And there are patients with a non-productive cough, and they are termed as dry bronchiectasis. And even when it is very severe, it can lead to dyspnea in around 72% of the cases. And there can be, like in cases of aspergillosis or any subsequent patient with asthma, and they are if they are harboring aspergillosis or IgM mediated inflammation due to aspergillosis. So such patients will also present with wheeze, and there can be a pleuritic chest pain. So signs will be the pathology voice depends on since it involves the lungs, the local signs will be there, like crackles, wheeze, or rhonchi. Most importantly, there will be clubbing, Clubbing will be, it's a very important, one of the very important findings. And in severe cases with hypoxia, it may be associated with cor pulmonale or features of right ventricular failure. And cyanosis plethora are again a very one of the finding due to chronic hypoxia in cases of bronchiectasis. So diagnosis is through routine examination. You have a clinical history, and radiological feature is very important. And then you will have lab test. So in lab test you will have you will look for the WBC in any uh, neutrophilia. Then most importantly, before initiating an antibiotic, you should get a sputum culture done. Then X-ray chest is very important because it have certain clinical, certain specific signs. Then then an HRCT, or also called uh, uh, high resolution contrast CT, high resolution CT, and it is an imaging modality of choice where you will find on CT you will find the airway dilatation, and which forms a tram track sign, which I'll show later on. There may be a signet ring sign. You have to remember this important term. Then there will be a lack of bronchial tapering, and there will be subsequent bronchial wall thickening and with dilated airways, and there might be inspissated secretions, especially in cystic fibrosis in children. Then so you will find a tree in bud appearance. And then we have to rule out foreign body underlying mass. So radiographically, where you will see the increased pulmonary markings, or honeycombing, or atelectasis, or pleural changes. And specific findings, as I talked about, there will be lucencies which will be linear and parallel markings, and they will be radiating from the hilar towards the pleura, and it will like a tram tack appearance, especially in the cylindrical bronchiectasis. Then they will have dilated bronchi in varicose bronchiectasis. Then you will have cluster cyst in cystic bronchiectasis. So this is the picture. You can see cystic and cylindrical bronchiectasis, where the right lower lobe on a posterior PA chest radiograph. So this is more common. This is the right lower lobe involvement, which is more common in aspiration, in micro aspiration, or when the cause is the aspiration. This is a very common finding. CT is very important. CT is a high resolution CT. It is, as you can see, is about 84 to 97% sensitive and very specific. And based on CT findings, you can classify bronchiectasis as cylindrical bronchiectasis. You will have again a tram track lines in the longitudinal section, or signet ring in case of a horizontal section along the adjacent pulmonary artery. And then you have varicose bronchiectasis, which has irregular or bedded bronchi with alternating dilatation and constriction. Then a cystic bronchiectasis will have, especially in aspiration, when the aspiration is the cause, and it forms, it can form abscess, and you can form a large cystic spaces, a honeycombing appearance, and this contrasts with plebs of emphysema. Then this is the CT scan, which depicts area of both cystic bronchiectasis and varicose bronchiectasis. You can see the cyst form. This is all are the cyst. This is the cyst, and this is the beaded appearance. You can see. varicose, then the varicose bronchiectasis with alternating areas of bronchial dilatation and constriction. You can see all this dilatation and constriction. Then a cylindrical bronchiectasis with signet ring appearance. This is a signet ring appearance, and you can see luminal airway diameter is greater than the diameter of the adjacent vessels. So sputum analysis, then immunoglobulin levels of IgG, IgM, IgA for hypogammaglobulinemia, quantitative serum alpha-1 antitrypsin level, then sputum analysis is a Gram-Steen for Pseudomonas, E. coli, and even atypical pneumonia, or you can get a non-Euchardt sputum which is suggestive of Pseudomonas, or then you can see snow-filled plugs, or which containing hyphae, which is more suggestive of Aspergillus species. So then routine bacterial, fungal, and mycobacterial culture may reveal the subsequent organism. Then a sweat test for evaluation of cystic fibrosis by the name of pilocarpine ionophorese. Then there is something skin test for Aspergillus antigen, or precipitin test, Aspergillus precipitin test, or they can have serum IgA level can be measured. Then pulmonary function test is very important for bronchiectasis for actually looking for any subsequent damage or subsequent prognosis of chances of subsequent exacerbation, because any rapid decline which is seen in Pseudomonas infection and which is associated with increased pro-inflammatory markers, that is not a very good sign. So electron microscopy to see the evidence of those primary ciliary structure abnormality and dyskinesia, as it happens in Categoner syndrome. Bronchoscopy is not very useful in diagnosing bronchiectasis, but it is useful in diagnosing any endobronchial tumor or any foreign body which impacted in the bronchi, or it may collect for the bronchoalveolar lavage for the specimen for culture and staining. So basically the bronchiectasis, the main treatment is antibiotic, and the second is supportive. Supportive is cessation of smoking, then adequate nutritional aspect, and immunization for influenza and pneumococcal. Oxygen therapy is reserved for patient with hypoxemia and end stage complications. So most importantly, you have to treat the infection, because it is subsequent inflammation has to be arrested. You have to treat the infection there itself before it becomes very fatal, or it leads to respiratory arrest or cardiovascular failure. So you have to treat the infection, then clearance of secretion is very important, and then treatment of underlying problem of course is damn important. So antibiotics during the acute phase, you can try oral antibiotics, fluoroquinolones or beta carbapenems, and it should be chosen. The antibiotic should be chosen according to the sputum cultures and Gram-Steens. And when Pseudomonas is the suspected organism, you might try oral quinolones or parenteral therapy or aminoglycosides, or even nebulization of the aminoglycoside, aerosol aminoglycoside, along with the carbapenem or third generation cephalosporin should be given. And duration of therapy is usually proposed to be 10 to 14 days. Then bronchial hygiene is bronchial hygiene, where you can use proper mechanical and devices with proper positioning of the patient, and which can help the patient to expel the copious secretions. Postural drainage is very important, with percussion and vibration and those hand clapping on the chest and on the back, which helps in effective clearance. There are certain devices which can be used, and there's something called vest system, where a pneumonatic compression vest is worn by the patient periodically throughout the day. So basically it is for the clearance of the mucus. So this is the tapping of the chest wall to dislodge the secretion. This is how the postural drainage is being done. Use of mucolytics in the form of acetylcysteine and all can lead to thinning out of the mucus, but their role is not very predictive. And those recombinant DNAs can be helpful in the destruction of DNA and release of by the neutrophils, and it has shown to improvement in some cases of cystic fibrosis. Uh, then bronchodilators, since it is the obstruction and there is a permanent dilatation, so to some extent the beta agonist can be used, which can mitigate airflow obstruction. And use of hypertonic saline for nebulization can have added beneficial benefits. The anti-inflammatory doesn't have a much role. It depends on the cause. If the cause is autoimmune, you can use steroids in inhalational or oral form, or you can azithromycin is proposed to have an anti-inflammatory properties, and it has been shown a marked improvement in cystic fibrosis and non-cystic fibrous bronchiectasis. Surgical resection is the uh, last option, and it usually is helpful in a very advanced and complicated cases where you have a focal disease that is poorly controlled by antibiotics, and there can be where so you have a massive hemoptysis because of the erosion, endothelial bronchial erosion into the pulmonary artery. Then you can, or bronchial artery rather, so your bronchial artery embolization may be attempted, because this is a very severe and fatal condition where you have to act quickly. So as complication, pus, empyema, hemorrhage, prolonged air leak, or persistent dentatitis. The mortality is very less, and prognosis depends on how you manage this case, because it's a progressive disease. It is a permanent dilatation of the bronchi, and subsequent prognosis depends on your line of management and on the kind of primary cause of the bronchiectasis. Lung transplantation where patients with FEV1 less than 30. These are the one last resort which can be tried in cases of very severe bronchiectasis, predominantly related to cystic fibrosis. So that's all about bronchiectasis. Anything you need to know, you can fire in your questions, or you want me to repeat anything. You can let me, you please let me know if you want me to repeat anything. I hope the audibility is not a concern. I hope you're able to hear me loud and clear, I hope, because I'm not sure about the system. A small topic, bronchiectasis, but it's a very important topic from your examination point of view. And management wise is very simple, depends on the primary disease and mainly the antibiotic. You have to address the local inflammations. One thing I would like to mention in bronchiectasis, the particular lobes are susceptible, like in tuberculosis and cystic fibrosis. Upper lobe is susceptible. In cases of aspiration, you will have usually the lower or middle lobe is susceptible, especially the right lungs. Then lower lobe is more susceptible in infective pathologies, and 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 that focal causes, again aspiration can lead to focal bronchiectasis. Then those subsequent aspergillosis related hypersensitive mechanism can also lead to localized bronchiectasis. And usually the autoimmune diseases, it encompasses the whole the whole lung, so it's very diffuse in process, like SLE or rheumatoid arthritis. And they tend to, there is a term called traction bronchiectasis. This is because of the fibrosis, they cause traction bronchiectasis. And in aspergillosis, you will have a central bronchiectasis. I hope this topic wasn't too heavy for you. If anything you want to ask, you can let me know.